This is FIDE Master Victor Neustroyev, and thank you for joining my webinar. Today we are going to talk about how to transform your advantage. I think this is one of the most important topics, especially for advanced club players. Okay, so while we are waiting for more attendees to come, please let me know if the sound and video quality is good. I'm streaming this webinar on both platforms, Twitch and YouTube. And the webinar is recorded. Okay, thank you, Parallax. Looks like everything is good. Just maybe a few minutes, we'll wait for more attendees. If there are people who attend the webinar for the first time, guys, I kindly ask you to just a little bit introduce yourself. You can just tell which country are you from and what's your ELO. It can be a FIDE rating or just chess.com rating or even lead chess rating. Because I need to understand how detailed I should explain the material. Oh, John is here. Perfect. Okay, so 5 attendees on Twitch at the moment. Okay, Marco will be coming. Okay, who else is going to come? By the way, guys, you can share your experience, what happened in your chess life this week. So did you improve? Did you mainly played blitz games? How did they go? And do you feel that you are getting better after passing the webinars? Okay, fine. Let's start, guys. So first of all, I would like to show you the book that I bought, and this is actually, I have only a Russian version of this book. So the book by Boris Gelfand, and the name of the book is you see, it's in Russian. It's written here. Taking positional decisions in chess. And today's webinar is based on this book, and of course my own experience. Usually I don't want. Usually I don't buy books. I mean, yeah. So some old books can be found on internet, and new interesting. I usually prefer to buy just electronic versions, which are cheaper, and for me it's easier. However, this one, which I really like, I decided to buy a paper book, just because this book really deserves our attention. And if you are a 2000 player, for example, or maybe you are about 1800, this is what you definitely need. Who is the author? It's Boris Gelfand. I can type it here. Boris Gelfand is the author. Okay. Boris also wrote another book, which is called Taking Dynamic Decisions in Chess. So this book is about positional decisions, and the other book is about dynamic decisions. So I want you to, no, if you want, you can read them both. It's up to you whether you decide to buy it or you somehow borrow or find it on internet. It's up to you. I don't care, but this is a really good book that I recommend. For advanced club players, for example, if you are only 1200, then it's too early for you to use this book. So let's talk about types of advantages. So there are two types of advantage that you may know. No, of course, you can make another classification, but mainly chess players divide the advantage into two types: static and dynamic. Static advantage and dynamic advantage. Do you know, how do you understand it? How do you understand static advantage? What do you think it is? Or can you suggest some examples of static advantage? Okay, so a better pawn structure is a static advantage. I agree with you. What else? Material. Yeah, material is also a static advantage. Okay, there is a good comment from Milo S3R. Better activity. No, actually, you're mistaken. Better activity is a dynamic advantage. Why it's a dynamic advantage? Because static advantage is something that is long term. For example, you have a better pawn structure, you have a bishop pair, you have yeah, you have a bishop versus knight in the open position, or knight versus bishop in the closed position. No, it's dynamic. But bishop versus knight in the open position, it's static. So yeah, and of course, yeah, better pawn structure, this is what I said. Yeah, this all is static advantage. Why? Because if the position change, you still gonna have this advantage. So your better pawn structure still exists, and no, if you don't change it, you'll still have this advantage. So if you don't exchange your bishop for knights, you'll still have them, and you can later realize this advantage. And now about dynamic advantage. Dynamic is something really short term. And the examples of such a kind of advantage are better development, pieces activity, initiative, maybe some space as well, or a kingside attack. Why? Because, for example, if speaking about activity, let's say now at the moment your pieces are located better, and so they are better activated. You have more perspectives. But if you, for example, play a few average moves, you will allow your opponent to activate his pieces, and then you won't have this kind of advantage anymore, because your opponent will activate these his pieces, and then pieces activity will be similar, for example. What else? Initiative. So while you're making attacking moves, you are better. If only you make several average moves without threats, then you're gonna lose this dynamic advantage. Leading development is also a dynamic advantage. A kingside attack that you have right now is also a dynamic advantage, because if only you let your opponent to open the position in the center or move his pieces to the defense, then you're gonna lose it. And it's very often when a chess game you have to transform one form of advantage to another form. For example, you may sacrifice extra exchange to ruin the pawn structure. If you have a bishop pair, you can just at a certain moment of the game exchange one of the bishops for a knight to be able to gain the pawn, to worsen enemy pawn structure, or maybe start even the attack. Or if you have the attack, you may just convert it to extra material. For example, you don't see a checkmate, but you at least see how you can get an extra pawn and then pass the game into a technically winning endgame. So you transform your attack into the material advantage, so from dynamic advantage to a static advantage. Or you can play it in a different way. So it's very often when one of the players sacrifices the pawn to be able to start the attack or to get the initiative. For example, I demonstrated the game where I played against an international master, and I sacrificed the pawn on e6 in Caro-Kann. I can show you. Not in Caro-Kann, sorry. I did it in Alekhine defense. d6, knight goes here, knight goes there, then I played c4, knight goes there, and then I played d6. So the idea was to fork in case of bishop takes, and if pawn takes on e6, then I have a better development, because now he has some problems if with this bishop. If he decides to fiancetta, I can play h4 and undermine it. So bishop g7, I played h5, which is a kind of inaccuracy. The best move was this, and then after h5, black is in trouble. They are under the attack. So the best move here for black is to play e5, and after d5, sacrifice the pawn back. But even there, white is better because of better pieces activity. For example, castle here. Okay. So if speaking about space advantage, it's also a static advantage which you can transform. And here today I prepared 3 games played by Akiba Rubinstein, where he successfully converted his advantage. So Akiba Rubinstein was well known as a good technical player. He could come up with a plan in a technical complicated position. Okay, so yeah, thank you for your comments. Yeah, I didn't mention the outpost, which is a static advantage. Yeah, that's right. Okay, let's continue. And start the game analysis actually. The first game is the game between Akiba Rubinstein versus Aaron Nimzovich. d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, and bishop b4. You know, this is Nimza Indian defense. Queen c2, d6, and Akiba Rubinstein played e3 move, which is known as a Rubinstein variation. So it's funny. So both players were playing the openings named after them. So Nimzovich was playing Nimza Indian defense. Akiba Rubinstein was playing a Rubinstein variation in Nimza Indian defense. c5. No, actually, d6 is not the best move here. So some of my students play Nimza Indian, and I suggest to play d5 here. d6, e3, c5, bishop d3, knight c6, knight ge2 to replace the knight. And black played d5, maybe not the best move here. Oh, of course, d5. And black decided to capture on c3. This is a logical move. However, black usually does this move when they are forced to play. For example, after a3 they take, white spends a tempo on the useless move a3. Or in case if white is forced to capture with the b pawn, then the c4 pawn is a weakness. But because this is an old game, and at that time Nimzovich was not familiar that it's always better to provoke white to make a move to force black to take, and that can be a kind of advantage. He took immediately. Now the question for you, which piece should we capture on c3? What do you think? So parallax is absolutely correct. Here we should definitely take with the queen. Now with the pawn, we make the pawn on c4 a weakness, and something like knight a5, b6, and bishop a6 can be played to attack this pawn. If we capture with the knight, then we lose our light squared bishop. So queen takes. Knight retreats to e7. Oh, queen goes back to c2 to control the center. Castle, castle, knight g6, knight g3, rook e8, and now I would like you to suggest a plan for white. Don't forget about the advantage or the benefits that white has and what black has, and if you are white, you should use your strong sides and avoid positions where black can activate their pieces. So parallax suggests f4 immediately to challenge the center. What else? What other suggestions do you have, guys? b3 or e4, opening the b file. So you understand that white has a bishop pair. That's why, to be able to take the advantage of the bishop pair, they should open up the position. Opening the b file doesn't actually improve the bishops. Opening the position in the center usually does. So knight e4 doesn't make much sense, I think. No, let's play this move. Knight e4. Knight takes e4, bishop takes e4, and they can maybe do this, then queen d7, and finally play f5. or bishop d7 just b5 to undermine. So I don't think that exchanging knights offers any advantage. The other thing you may notice here, white has more space. That's why after changing pieces, you leave black with more room to maneuver. So that's why if an exchange of a certain piece pair doesn't improve white's position, then you shouldn't do these exchanges at all. There was another solution to play f4 immediately. So wait a sec. Yes, this move makes sense, of course. It's a logical, but then they can maybe play b5 to undermine the center, and after this they take, and something like this won't work. Just bishop b7. No, bishop b7. Maybe f5. Okay, I'm mistaken. Not bishop. Yeah, actually. Oh. Wait, no, knight e7 first, and then this knight captures on d5. So f4 right now is too early. As for e4 move, which I believe most of you would play, yeah, this is actually a critical mistake here, because this move closes the position. a6. And then what? If you want to open it, you should play f4. But if you play f4, you first lose your bishop pair. Second, no, they may take. Second, you leave the e5 square for the enemy pieces, so it works like a strong point for a knight. After which, the knight on e5 is much better than any other minor piece in this position. So maybe just something like that could make sense, or maybe b3 to support the pawn on c4. These are good moves for this position. What happened in the game? f3. Okay, just a kind of a prophylaxis to control here, to prevent any knight g4 activities. Bishop d7, bishop d2, a6. Here, Akiba Rubinstein played h3, which, in my opinion, is a tempo loss. I think b5 is a kind of a problem, and the white should solve the problem with this move right away. What can you suggest white to play in this exact position? a4. What else? b4. You mean before? Before immediately. Before c takes b4, bishop takes b4, b5, and you may take, no, if c takes b5, I think bishop takes b5, and if this move, then b takes c4. What then? Now, if bishop takes c4, it's just queen b6 check. Oh, it's not a check. The pawn is still on e3, but queen b6 is anyway strong attack. So no, actually, looks like b4 is too optimistic. So a4. I like bishop f5. Okay, bishop f5 to get rid of the bishop and put. Yeah, but if you play bishop f5, you lose a bishop pair. If there were no bishop pair for white, I would say yes, but here a4 looks better. What happens then? b5 anyway. After a takes b5, a takes b5, c takes b5, they capture on d5. How would you continue with white in this position? So rook a6 is one of the suggestions. What else? Queen b3. Queen b3. No, queen b3 I don't think makes much sense. Just knight b6 to block the pawn. Rook a6 is better because you are taking the control over the a file, plus you attack on d6, and if they decide to take, then your pawn is far advanced and actually also protected with your bishop. So this is where white is better. That's why playing a4 is a logical move. Something like that leads to a swap, but then b5. However, maybe not so bad. After b3 and e4, this is still a playable position. Because after that, you are going to open it with f4. But don't play f4 immediately, use your g-pawn to be able to capture on f4 with the g-pawn and still control the center and restricts the knights. Okay. So he played h3, b5, and b3 just supporting the center. Queen b6, king goes to h2, and black initiates a queenside attack with a5, rook a to b1, because if now a4, they can just take on a4, and in case of rook a4, just queen a4, because the b pawn is pinned. But black closed the position with b4, so they are about to play a4, open the a file, double the rooks, and enter our camp with rook a2. That's actually the plan. But this is where we should stop and think. Black has a clear play on the queen side. What do you think white should do? White are well centralized, they have more space, they have a bishop pair. Let's suggest a plan. Okay, bishop e4. What else? Bishop e4, I think, has no idea behind. They can just ignore. f5, you mean f4 or bishop f5? Open king side or the center. Yeah, but how to open it? Yeah, actually, you're absolutely right. If you want to take the advantage of your bishop pair, you should open up the position. But which exact move to play? So maybe it makes sense to play knight e2 or knight e4, knight g5. However, maybe knight e2, g5, g4. That's the plan. Oh, let's say this plan makes sense, but what's then? If you want to push f4, you shouldn't play knight e2. And actually, yes, f4 is the main idea. With this move, white wanted to open up this diagonal and then just replace the bishop to be able to fully use both bishops. E takes f4 was played in the game, but I would like to ask you, what if a4 is played? What would you do now with white? Which plan would you choose? So because with a4, black doesn't want to open the position, while originally we wanted to open it with f4. But what if it's still closed? Should we take on e5 or should we play anything better? What do you think? Who knows? Okay, looks like nobody knows. Okay, thanks Jones for thanks for suggesting f takes e5, but I don't think this move works. So f takes e5 they capture with which piece? They should capture with the piece, but if they capture with the knight, probably you have this sacrifice. If g takes f6, then you have a strong attack, which I would avoid if I were black. So if knight d3, queen d3, g takes f6, looks like it's still a problem after, let's say, rook f1. Taking with the knight doesn't look good, but actually black's position is solid in case if they capture with the rook. Bishop goes there to play this move. And after a3, let's say, rook takes f6 still works. Then you should activate this bishop and get rid of the rook. Maybe knight h5 then. Yeah, and take on f6. So this is a strong attack actually. Yeah, f takes e6 makes sense. F takes e5 makes sense. Another option that actually I would play is f5. Yeah, I understand that actually our original plan was just to open up the position and take the advantage of the bishop pair, but why not to have a one-way attack? Knight f8, for example, then we can continue with e4, and then just push the g pawn and play on that side of the board. While all strong pieces are located here, and while black will be doing this plan with rook invasion, we can just successfully initiate a pawn march and chase the knight and open up the position on the king side. Knight h4 for black here. What's the idea? Just e4 and bishop g5. The knight is trapped. I don't think it makes much sense. So f4 was played, but black captured. E takes f4, knight f8. Bishop c1 to get it to b2. Queen comes back to support the king, but actually it's too late. Queen f2, a4, bishop b2. A takes b3. No, knight f6, knight g6, rook d1, a takes b3, a takes b3, and in this position it was rook a7 played. Not the best option. However, how would you play in this position after rook a2? What do you think? Okay, so bishop b1 is one of the suggestions. What else? Bishop takes f6 to pass the game into the end game. That makes sense as well. Rook d2. Yeah, actually rook d2 looks like a good move. No, what can I say? Yeah, it makes sense to play this move. Rook takes f2, bishop takes d8, rook takes f1. rook takes rook, rook takes bishop, and then knight e4 to pressure. Bishop f5, just knight c5 is okay. So bishop to c8, and then you can play g4, king there, and try to enter their queen side. In this endgame, white will be much better. So passing the game into the endgame makes sense here. Rook a1 is another alternative. Bishop b1 also looks like a good move, but when you play such a move, you should always understand that knight g4 may come. Knight g4, h takes g4, then queen h4, rook b2, queen takes b2, and queen h4 is coming. King has to go to g1, queen takes g3, they are down the exchange, but these pawns are hanging. f5 doesn't look good because of knight f4 and rook coming to e2, so probably it's better to take, then h takes, and then you just continue with this, letting him capture on g4. But white position is better. Yeah, white is almost winning. If you can exchange the queens, then you'll be absolutely winning. So actually, bishop b1 is quite a complicated move. So rook a2 wasn't played anyway. Rook a7 was, and white exchanges black active pieces. Rook a1, rook takes a1, knight f8, bishop takes f6. So you see, at this moment they convert their advantage of a bishop pair to something else. What's the idea of taking on f6? What do you think? Why do we convert our bishop pair advantage to another kind of advantage? And how can you explain this other type of advantage that we get? Oh, yeah, the logic is that after this move we play knight e4. How does the queen go? Where the queen goes? If I'm missing any comments, just let me know. First, I read comments on Twitch. Second, I read on YouTube. Yeah, queen goes to h6. That's right. After knight e4, queen goes to h6. And what then? Why in this position white is better than it is in this original position? Why after queen h6, white is better than here? Who knows? Knight g5 with threats. What exact threats? Rook e8. No, rook e7 probably. I don't think it's a big threat. Rook e7 is coming, but knight g6. Knight g6 doesn't work because we blunder the pawn on d6. Okay, I see. However, I think, guys, in this position, white gets a concrete idea. So with queen h6 has to be played. For example, queen e7 protecting here just knight c5. No, actually, yeah, if they don't want to lose this pawn, they have to play queen h6. Oh, queen g6, still knight c5. So queen h6, and now knight g5 looks good, but f5 then. So here the main advantage was to get a kind of initiative. with this move we attack on d6, and our task is just to prevent the queen's attack or support of d6. To be able to prevent it, we should play f5 and f6. Rook a3, they are trying to get some compensation here, but rook b1 supporting it. Rook goes to a6, supporting on d6, and g4. With this move, white threatens to play g5, queen h4, and bishop e2, which traps the queen. So that's why black is forced to play f6, and with f6 it locks the queen, black locks the queen out of the game. This is what Akiba Rubinstein calculated, and that was the reason to play bishop takes f6 to exchange the bishop for a knight. The queen will be out of the game for at least 10 moves more. King g3 to get this square from the queen. They played bishop c8, and rook comes back to e1. Bishop b7. Black plays some moves, but they don't improve their position. Queen e2, with the idea of moving the knight and entering their camp. And here black even made their position worse. They played knight d7 and blundered a tactical strike. What do you think? How white should play in this position? Who knows? Okay, knight d6 is suggested. Can you please share the variation after knight takes d6? Which illustrates that white is much better there, or white is winning there. As for knight to c5, I don't see the point. For example, d takes c5, queen e8, knight f8. However, even there, I think white is winning even there. Queen e8, queen b8, rook e8. That makes sense. Okay, let's look at this line. This is what was actually played in the game. This move, queen e8, knight f8, and you suggested queen b8 move. But queen b8 move, they play rook d7. And if now you play rook e8, they have rook f7. So no, it doesn't work. The winning move in this position is just rook e7 with queen f7 and queen takes f8. To be able to prevent this queen f7, they have to play g6. Queen f7, king h8. Now rook pins the knight, so the white is threatening with this, what leads to a checkmate. And finally black plays the last move, rook d8. The idea of this move is to distract the e-rook. For example, if rook takes here, then after queen e3, it's likely to be a perpetual check. Queen d2, for example, and queen e1, and so on. So, how to play in this position after rook d8 to win the game and, of course, to avoid a perpetual check? Queen takes f6, and after king g8. No, you can't capture on d8. Oh, you can. Yeah, you can capture on d8. Yeah, queen f6, king takes there, and yes, you can capture on d8 with your queen. That's right. Or you can play like Akiba Rubinstein and play queen e6. King g7, f6 with the check, king goes there, and then you just capture the rook simply because he can't enter to e3, he can only enter to d2, but it doesn't make sense because it's not a check, and you just simply take this knight on f8 and checkmate. Okay, there is one line I didn't cover. So here, instead of knight takes d6, there was another good move, h4, which traps the queen on the next move. So this is where they have to react somehow. And one of the best moves could be g5. However, after g5, f takes g6, and this falls under a discovered attack, for example. This move falls under a concrete tactical strike. Can you find this concrete tactical strike now? Who knows? Knight takes f6, knight takes f6, knight takes f6, queen e6, king g7, and how to play then? Queen e7. Yeah, even queen e7 works. Knight f6, knight takes f6, queen e6, king g7. g5 is better, but queen e7 is also a strong move. Then you take here and join the rook. So, for example, what? Well, knight h5 is not a problem. Just move the queen away, king away, like that. So they have to play with this queen. Where? No, if h7, it's queen f6 cannot be played. This and this. This is a mate, despite where they move the queen. Now, let's say they move here. You do this move. They go there. You play this move. And if queen g8, you just play queen h6, queen h7, and rook e8 mate. So instead of knight d6, h4 was another way to take the advantage of the queen standing on h6. So you see, here white played two critical ideas. First of all, they realized that their position is better and they should open the position to be able to activate both bishops. To be able to do this, they played f4, offering an exchange. And the second critical position was here when white realized that they are better, and now it's time to convert their static advantage, so the bishop pair is a static advantage, to a dynamic advantage. They took on f6, and then with this initiative forced the enemy queen to stay on h6 and to get locked out. After that, they took the advantage of the queen being trapped or being locked out, so the queen no longer could join the defense of black pieces. Okay, fine. That was a brilliant game by Akiba Rubinstein. We also have two more games to analyze today. And the other game that I would like to show you is the game that he played against Grigory Levenfish. d4 e6, e4 d5, so it was French defense. And bishop g5 here. Bishop g5, bishop e7, e5, knight fd7. Bishop takes there, queen takes there. So it's a classical variation of French defense. One of the common plans is to castle queenside in this position. Castle f4, c5, knight f3 first. And in this position, the main move is knight c6. After which you have either to take or to castle queenside. However, if you castle queenside, you may fall under the attack with c4, a6, b5, and so on. So it makes more sense to take first, and after queen takes c5 or knight takes c5, you can castle. This position will be slightly better for white, with a plan to start a kingside attack. So okay, guys, the names of players are written here, so below and over the board. So for example, this is the game Rubinstein versus Levenfish, and the previous game was Rubinstein versus Nimzovich. So here Levenfish played f6, a typical move to undermine the position. However, here it's not the best solution because black is not developed yet. E takes f6, queen takes f6, the pawn is hanging, that's why g3, knight c6, and castle. Black played a6, which is a typical move, but here, while the position becomes more open, it's too slow. What do you think is the best option for black here? C takes d4 or e5. No, e5 right away cannot be played, I believe, not enough defenders. e5, d takes e5, yeah, d takes e5, and after knight e5, knight takes knight. No, e5 is not a good move, but c takes, you mean c takes d4 and then e5, but the pawn on d5 is hanging. c4 makes more sense, but yeah, you should open up the position. Then knight d4, queen d4, and maybe play this in game, which is slightly better for white. However, a6 is too slow, which allowed white to activate their pieces. Bishop g2, the last piece is developed, and knight b6. With this plan, black wanted to play knight c4 and pressure on b2, also chase the queen. However, they blunder it. They blunder it d takes c5 here, because if now they play knight c4, queen f2 can be played. And now b5 and b4 plan is no longer possible because of en passant. If, let's say, knight d7 to capture the pawn back, then you can just centralize, because knight takes c5 doesn't work. If this move happens, how would you play? Yes, you're absolutely right. It's just knight takes d5, knight takes d5, e takes d5, queen takes d5, and this knight is hanging. So if they don't want to lose it, they have to play knight e6. But after bishop h3, you put enough pressure and gain this knight back. Let's say knight d8, knight g5, rook e8, but here you can, for example, play rook e5, rook e1 and just double, or you can play something sneaky like knight h7, because if king h7, queen h5, you gain the rook. So d takes c5 was a good move. Instead, Akiba Rubinstein activated his rook. Knight c4, queen goes there. And this is where black could probably continue with g5 to sharpen the position. But they played b5 with the typical idea of playing b4 or of taking on b2 and then b4. There was a move that guaranteed an absolutely winning position for white here, and for some reason Akiba Rubinstein missed it. I also want you to find it. So you see, he was a good technical player, but because he was a because he was a human, and every human makes mistakes, so he always miscalculate. No, not always, but from time to time he miscalculated, blundered, and didn't take the advantage of the mistakes that his opponent made. So after b5, what do you think how to play? D takes c5, you mean? This is what actually Rubinstein played. Knight takes d5, knight g5. No, let's try. Knight takes d5, e takes d5, knight g5, bishop g4, let's say. If you take there, king goes to h8, you can take on c6, right? Ah, it doesn't make sense. The queen is still there. So looks like it doesn't make sense to sacrifice the knight on d5. But you can play just knight to e5. And they are forced to take on e5, because if not, let's say they take there, you can capture here. And after b takes c4, just knight d5 works, because there is a rook hanging. Knight d5, it takes d5, bishop takes here, bishop to e6. You can just capture on d4 and then take here. Moreover, here you take with your rook, threatening with a discovered attack. After which, let's say you either gain the queen. Yeah, you gain the queen. The queen has no places to hide. Queen e5, rook e5. So knight e5 was the best move. They have to take it. You take with the d pawn, queen goes there, and knight d5 still works. Of course, they may play bishop e6, but no worries, just take there, and you are so many pawns up. So even with your rook, you take the other pawn on c5 as well. So f5, f6, the game should be over soon. Here, 2 rooks plus 2 pawns in the center decide the game. Maybe he just didn't analyze it enough, but he took on c5. Knight b2, king b2, and b4. So here, to not to lose on c3, they have to block the diagonal. B takes c3, and taking on c3 was too risky. Black could obtain a long-term attack. Like that, for example, knight e5, and the pawn on c5 is hanging. So that's why king e1. Knight d4, queen takes d4. So what do you think White wanted to do here? Of course, they always, no, they calculated the line and they were expecting to reach this position. What was their plan? Now, if we go back, for example, to this position, here white looks better. They have better pieces development, some space, the control over the center, and then they decided to change the position to this. Yes, so King Marcher is correct. Because, you know, Akiba Rubinstein is good in technical positions. That's why he realized that he could successfully win this endgame. There is a weakness on e6. Also, general pawn structure for black doesn't look good. And the pawn on c3 is a weakness, so he manages to gain it. What happened then? For example, queen takes d4, rook takes d4, rook a7 to play rook c7, rook a3, rook c7, rook takes c3, bishop d7, bishop f1, a5, and in this position black is able to gain the pawn back, but because of a better pawn structure, I think white would have more chances to succeed. So I'm sure that if there was a good player, if it was a top player playing with black pieces, he could probably make a draw, even against such a strong player as Rubinstein. But this is where only white plays for a win. So it's either a win for white or black lose, or it's a draw. So it's only for two results. So as for Levenfish, he wasn't good enough. However, he was already a grandmaster. He just played rook b8 move. So you see, he didn't spend the tempo on rook a7. He played this, rook a3. Now the pawn is lost. g5, a kind of a counterplay, but just a rook c3, because opening the position here actually is not in their favor. For example, who can tell me what happens in case if queen takes pawn on f4? Yeah, it's just rook g3, and the king, no, either the queen takes or king goes to f7 and loses the queen on f4. So that's why bishop d7. However, here we can pass the game into the endgame, exchange the queens, and then play c6. But c6 was played immediately. Queen d4, rook d4, bishop escapes, bishop h3. So you see, now white takes the advantage of a better pawn structure. Rook f6, but c7, and after rook c8, it's just a simple tactical strike, rook d5. If e takes d5, extra pawn plus a passed pawn on c7. Rook takes c7, and the final move was bishop e6, sacrificing the bishop. No, the idea of rook c7 was that if white captures, black captures on d5. But white can sacrifice the bishop and gain the exchange. So if rook takes a6, rook takes c7, there is nothing to talk about. It's extra exchange plus two extra pawns. So here, a better position, more space, and better pieces activity was transformed to a better endgame where only white could play for a win. However, this solution was not the best option for white to play. They could find a concrete move that allowed them to gain the material immediately. If only they play knight e5, they could win much quicker, I think. And here, after knight b6, they didn't take the advantage of black mistake. So black played too slowly. White white pieces are located better, plus there is always a weakness on d5, so d takes c5 could also offer a winning position for white. So sometimes Akiba Rubinstein plays well, but he also makes mistakes because he is a human. He was a human, of course, and not Magnus Carlsen, who almost makes no mistakes. Okay, the last game that I would like to show today is the game that Akiba Rubinstein played against Karl Schlechter. It was something King's Indian. d4, knight f6, knight f3, d6, c4, bishop g4, which is quite uncommon for these positions. That's why here I would probably suggest something like that, which takes the advantage of the weakness on b7 and also protects this knight on f3. But knight c3, knight bd7, and after h3, white had to capture with the e-pawn. Even in this position, white is better. They have still a bishop pair. e5, a typical move for King's Indian. So Lee Chess identifies this opening as Old Indian defense, or Tartakover Indian. Bishop e3, supporting on d4, c6, bishop e2, bishop e7. They both castled. Queen c2, queen c7, while white activates their pieces, and this is where black takes on d4. So this is a critical moment of the game. The first critical moment of the game. White has a bishop pair, however, there are also some advantages in black position, and you should come up with a plan, or at least suggest a move that that makes white's position better and black's position worse. Okay, King Marcher, please let me know what's your FIDE ELO. Oh, over 2000. Yeah, I see. Yeah, f4. Can you please explain the f4 move? Because this move is played not to activate the bishop, actually. Guys, to become a candidate master, you should be 2200 FIDE ELO, and to become a FIDE master, 2300. But sometimes you can get a candidate master or even FIDE master or even international master titles if you win tournaments. For example, I know a guy who got an international master title with only 2200 rating, and he won the championship of Central America. Okay, if you have 2000 USCF rating, you can become a chess expert. This is the official title for the United States. But there is no such a title for FIDE. Yeah. Okay, anyway, let's continue. Yes, you're absolutely right about f4, and the idea of this move is to restrict knight's activity. Bishop f3 can be played as well, but every time you play bishop f3, you should always remember about the pawn on c4 that can be easily attacked. So rook a d8, And here the main idea is to attack the weakness on d6. That's why white doubles. Knight f8. Bishop e3, and white pressures here. However, white needs another attacker. Knight e6 was played here. This is where I want you to think and suggest the move for white, or maybe consider about the plan. Because this is the moment where Akiba Rubinstein misunderstood the position. Actually, everyone is welcome on my webinars. So yeah, I just because it was many times when you suggested a right decision, so that's why I had two ideas: whether you are a good player or you actually remember this game, because this is classics and you can find these games in some different books, not only in Gelfan's book. By the way, guys, if you like my webinars, please invite your friends. We need to increase the number of attendees. So what f5 is suggesting? There are two people who suggested f5 here, which is not bad, but after f5 the knight comes to c5. Let's say bishop f4 to attack it. They're gonna play maybe this move just. And d6 is not hanging, but you can increase the pressure if you play g4, maybe g5 then. Also, you need to control the e4 square, so maybe rook d4 first to control it, and then g4, g5. Yeah, that makes sense. f5 is a good move. However, bishop f3 is okay, because if they play b5, you can just play b3 and still support the pawn on c4. Okay, perfect. It's always good when new people to come to our webinars. So if this is the first time you attend, just a little bit introduce yourself. Let me know which country are you from and what's your rating. So yeah, bishop f3 makes sense. f5 looks good. However, Akiba Rubinstein played a4, and this is a kind of inaccuracy. Why? Of course, he wanted to prevent b5, but he overestimated this move. Playing b5 here, no, right now b5 is a blunder. Just c takes b5, a takes b5, knight takes b5. Or bishop takes b5. Wait. No, guys. b5, c takes b5, a takes b5, not knight, because this queen is protected. I think chess.com rating is more representative. So b5 here I can't capture with the knight because the pawn is not pinned. Actually, the queen on c7 is protected with the other knight from e6. So a takes b5 looks fine, and this is how white could get an extra pawn. Getting rid of the knight means that knight goes to c5, and then it still doesn't work. But b5 doesn't look like a good option for black anymore. a5, and they get the control over the b4 square. But guys, this is just the beginning. Later you will realize how clever Akiba Rubinstein is and how he can convert or transform the advantage that he finally got. So a5, f5, chasing away. bishop f4, taking here bishop f8, bishop f3, activating the bishop. And this is another critical moment of the game where I would say that in this position it's almost equal. White is just slightly better, but it's only because black has a certain plan here that allows them to sacrifice the pawn on d6. No, g4 for white, yes, but not immediately. You should first secure the e4 square. That's why bishop f3 was played. Another move is rook d4. But bishop f3 is okay. So what do you think black should do? How they should sacrifice the pawn on d6? Oh, by the way, for all beginners who attend my webinar for the first time, I kindly recommend you to download. Let me just wait a sec. Let me share the screen. I kindly recommend you to go to my website and download a self-study guide. Okay, so you can also read some nice posts here that can improve your chess skills. For example, this is how you can play Italian game with white pieces. But I actually wanted to show you another post. Yeah, this is called 5 tips for solving puzzles. So here I'll share the link. And here as well. Sorry. So here you can scroll down and get these 10 tips for self-studying chess. The book that was written for me, that was written by me for most of my students. This is where I give 10 practical tips that can improve your chess skills at any level. So here you can just use your email and subscribe and you'll get these automatically. Okay, let's get back. So what? Queen b6. Okay. So there is a good question. Can this book bring you to the FIDE Master title? No, I think it can help you with a part of your plan, of your training plan, but only this book, after you read it, you won't become a FIDE master, but it may help you a lot, especially if you don't do these 10 tips and if you don't know about them. Okay, so let's continue with the game. Queen b6. Yeah, queen b6 is the best move. What's the idea? Well, let me show you. For example, if bishop takes d6, bishop takes bishop, rook takes d6, here finally they can play rook e1, king goes there, and then just pin. Of course, this pin doesn't mean that white loses the rook. Queen d2 helps, and queen d2 also attacks here. So knight e8 doesn't work, just queen e1. But rook f1 is a key move, after which black is threatening with this. And if, let's say, this move to break to block the pin, then just rook f2, distracting the queen and taking on d6. In this endgame, black is much better and is likely to win the game. So here there is no bishop pair, there is only one bishop, but these two knights are well allocated. However, nobody asks you to capture on d6 immediately. You can just simply play this move. But then queen b4. This pawn is hanging. So, and if you decide to play knight e2, they can take on a4, queen a4, knight a4, b3, but looks like the knight is trapped. Is if knight c5, bishop takes c5, and the d pawn is pinned. However, they may sacrifice the exchange and get a full compensation. With two knights and better pieces activities, the position becomes equal. So the queen b6 to sacrifice the exchange after bishop e3 and get approximately equal position. So what happened in the game? Knight fd7. This is where white could increase the pressure. They'd better play maybe g5, g4. But they took on d6 immediately, which also makes sense. Bishop d6, rook d6, knight e5, attacking here. The rook is hanging as well. So the only move is rook d8. Knight takes f3, ruining the pawn structure, rook d8. This is where white transformed their advantage. So they transformed their bishop pair to an extra pawn. But you see, the pawns are tripled, and it's really difficult to take the advantage of such pawn majority. However, Akiba Rubinstein could do that. These three pawns on the f-file are called Irish pawn center. John, can you please tell me if I'm correct? And maybe you know the story why these three pawns are called Irish pawn center. Okay, so how to take the advantage? Now, what was the reason? What was the purpose to exchange two bishops for that extra pawn? Oh, I can Google it. Okay, so how to play for white, who knows? Okay, so Irish pawn center is actually a common phrase that explains such a situation when three pawns are on the f-file. but I didn't find the story why who was the first Irish player who did it. Okay, so no ideas. 94. Yeah, exactly, 94. And if knight takes knight, the pawn structure gets improved. Rook d1, queen takes d1 first, and black suggests to play b6 because this position is fine for black. Here 3 pawns stops these 3, and in the kingside pawn majority can't be converted to a passed pawn. Okay, so English Grandmaster Tony Miles. So he mentioned Irish pawn center in his report. So, and it was an Irish representative, Eamon Keoth, who was playing with triple pawns. Okay, perfect. And now we know why it's Irish pawn center. So here, after this move, white could activate their queen. So you see, they actually exchanged their bishop. No, they sacrificed the pawn on a4, but they transformed their extra pawn to the position where they could activate the queen. So an extra pawn was transformed to better pieces activity. With queen d4, they centralize, and the position is almost winning. They played f6. Of course, everyone understands that taking on f6 is a mistake. Something like that doesn't make much sense because of queen d2, queen d1, or even queen d5. The idea is to get the queen to g5. Playing g6 leads to queen d2, and after queen c8, just b3. Knight is trapped, the only square is c5, but then you can just simply, you can play this move, or you can just play queen a5, and black pieces are stuck. They can't move from the back rank, you checkmate, they can't attack the f6, while you are going to capture another pawn for free. That's why knight c5 was played. Knight takes c5, b takes c5, and queen g4. g6, but queen g3. If only queen takes queen, this pawn in game is absolutely winning because of the extra pawn on the king side. While on the queen side, this pawn majority cannot be transformed to a passed pawn. So queen takes d8, queen e5, a4, and h4, trying to initiate the attack there. So he repeated the position and then just took the pawn on c5. Queen e6, just queen e7. They can't exchange the queens. c5, g5, h takes g5, and then just queen e3, and it's time to resign because the pawn is lost. If queen f5, it's just queen e8 and queen takes f7, what leads to, I think it leads to a checkmate or to a pawn promotion. Queen e6 was played in the game, he sacrificed on g5, and later, after queen g4, black has nothing but to resign. However, they still played a few moves. This position is absolutely winning, and everyone understands it because of the extra pawn. Black is actually in the Zugzwang. They either have to play e5 and exchange one of the f pawns for the e pawn. After that, black takes the advantage of their white takes the advantage of their outside passed pawn. So if we go back to this critical position, queen d4 is the key move that I'm sure Akiba Rubinstein definitely saw, and Then he realized that even with this weird extra pawn, he can play f6 and then threaten checkmate or try to trap the knight on the edge. So what you may learn from this webinar, that don't stick to one type of the advantage that you have, because the position requires transformation, and to be able to win you should transform this advantage to another type of advantage. It's very often when you transform a static advantage to a dynamic advantage or vice versa. Just do it in case if you believe it improves your position in general, or it allows you to get a technically winning position. Like, for example, the end game that Rubinstein was going to play against Levenfish. Here, technically a much better position. So I believe White would take White would play it with a pleasure. Okay, yeah, there is a question. I'm going to answer it. So why not? So knight a4 here. No, first of all, queen d7 doesn't look good. Queen d7, queen e5, threatening a mate. And what? You have to play knight a6 or what? Then f6 and queen g5. So queen d7 doesn't look good, but you may say, why not this move? However, if you play this, then still f6. And in case of g6, still queen d2. With a huge advantage. For example, if queen d8, queen comes to d6, this pawn is hanging, so queen c8 maybe, queen e7, knight d6, and so on. Black is in a real trouble. So that didn't work. Okay, guys, do you have any questions? If you have any ideas, I stream every Sunday. This time it's 2 p.m. Sorry, it's 2 p.m. London time. Yes, I'm right. So just follow my account on chess.com. If you have any questions, you can message me at tricksofchess@gmail.com, and my chess.com username is this. Let me share. So this is my chess.com accounts. Just follow me and you'll get the announcement. Okay, so if no questions, let's finish our webinar for today. Don't forget to invite your friends if you think the webinar is helpful, and hope to see you next Sunday. Good luck.